psychology of ultra endurance performance. We're going to work on the basis that psychological skills can be learned, can be developed over time, can be developed through practice. It's really key that we pick up on that idea, because we're going to practice them, and you're going to practice them in the contexts which are relevant, and over time you'll be able to use these psychological skills when it gets really difficult. So key point number one is psychological skills can be developed through practice. Okay, we're going to learn psychological skills. Okay, we need to set the goal. I want to get better at learning psychological skills. Well, any goal has one of three different types of outcomes. One is an outcome goal. I want to achieve X. I want to cross the Atlantic. I want to keep going for 10 hours. I want to run a mile in under 7 minutes, 6 minutes, and so on. It's an outcome goal. You specify a target, a time that can be measured usually, a distance that can be measured, but you specify an outcome. The outcome is sometimes difficult to shift, because in order to cross the Atlantic, you have to cross the Atlantic, and so on. Quite simple, but the outcome is, it's an outcome goal. You're going to try and get to the end, and that's fairly key. Second is, the goal could be to learn, that you're not actually going to achieve something enormous. You're going to focus on learning. You might focus on learning a specific skill. I work with a lot of endurance athletes, such as cyclists, and we say the goal of this today is to learn to cycle up hills, and that is when your legs are really sore. The brain is going to try to be in a position where it is trying to turn those pedals round as smoothly and as easily as possible, to be as efficient in the skill as possible. So put that into your own sport. Where is the goal to improve the skills you need to do? Where is that about really important? Or it might be, if you're going to do ultra endurance, maybe the skill is about your mindset after, say, 10 hours in. Do you remain focused on the goal you want to achieve? Do you find that your concentration wanes? How do you get that concentration back? How do you learn about yourself so that you are better in those moments? Well, if you set the goal out to explore, what would my mind be like after 10 hours of exercise? You don't judge it if you stop earlier. You then capture the thoughts that came through your head. Those thoughts then become objects for future practice. I started saying to myself, I can't do this. Or at the point when you start saying to yourself, I can't do this, you then learn to reappraise that, look at that differently. When you say I can't do this, maybe I'm thinking at that point that the outcome I achieve myself, I'm going to run 50 miles, and you've got 20 miles, you could have done 30 miles, you've got 20 miles to go. Those extra 20 miles seem enormous. But if you rephrase it and say, well, maybe I can keep going for another 2 minutes, maybe I can get to that lamppost, maybe I can focus and work quite hard for the next 5 minutes, then I'll take a rest. And all of a sudden that refocus allows you to get re-energized and allows you to keep going, so you get refocused. And so learning goals really important. And then the third type of goal is process goals. Focus on the here and now. What will my brain be thinking on at the right in the here and now? So we set out on any task, and say it's a marathon, and we'll have a process goal. We realise we know the outcome goal to finish it. But the process goal will say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be relaxed and be in the moment. I'm going to relax my arms so that I'm not tense at the start. How many marathon runners, for example, set out in the first mile, run far too quickly, end up doing 9, 10, 11 minute miles, which is fairly normal, but the first mile 7 minutes. You don't get that time back. If you run an 11-minute mile, it feels slow, but you then learn to understand what running that pace is all about. If you're doing ultra endurance, typically the intensity of your exercise is paced. It's about, can you sustain this level of work for an enormously long period of time? Mentally, can you stay on the ball? Can you be concentrating hard? Typically waxes and wanes. So think very carefully about how you can sharpen that up by focusing on the here and now. Can I raise my intensity for a short period of time? What are the key cues of my environment to help me concentrate? Identify those key cues. Once you've identified them, you can then go, what is distracting me? Very good way of of focus of thinking. So goals, 3, outcome, will I achieve X? Learning, what have I learned? Process, what's my mind thinking on at the moment? Splitting tasks across those 3 different types of goals is a really useful way of breaking it down, because you might not achieve the outcome, but you can achieve an enormous amount of learning. You might not achieve the outcome, but you'll be in the process and actually making each moment better. And what you get from that is that you feel much better at the end of any session, of any performance, when you can say those bits were done quite well. Psychological skills. What psychological skills are there? Well, the good thing is that most people use these psychological skills normally, but what they don't do is try to tune them up. So imagery. What is imagery? Imagery is very simply going through a performance in your mind, replaying how you performed, replaying how you will perform in the future, but doing it all in your mind. Your mind is a movie. You put yourself in that movie. You can perform it, either watch it from the third person, so watching yourself, or through the eyes of the performer. So you are watching yourself perform. You replay that, and what that does, and what it allows you to do, is it allows you to slow things down. It allows you to learn how to do different tasks. It allows you to recreate pressure in your mind, so that what you're doing is creating a blueprint for when a similar situation occurs in the future. You've been through it, albeit in your mind, but you've been through it. You've got a plan for what happens when things start going tough. You've prepared for it. You've thought through, I feel really tired, but I've got to do X. I've got to shimmy up to this. I've got to move this. I've got to get to X, get to Y, because there's running, and that's because that's your goal. That's what you set out to do. But you play it in your mind. So when that thought comes through, it says, "Oh, I want to go home." You remind yourself, actually, let's not think. There's no point, no time to be thinking about going home. What I've got to do is, I've got to get my mind back on the here and now. What does this task require me to think about? Let's prioritise that. Let's image ourselves doing that task. Let's image of ourselves talking through what is needed to do that task. Imagery. Is it hard? Well, firstly, start off by trying to imagine an apple. Put the image of the apple in your mind. Close your eyes. Can you see the apple? Oh, I can see it. Oh, I can taste my apple. Oh, it's a crispy red one. And you try to sharpen up the image in your mind so that you can really see it really clear. Say to yourself, how well could I see that? 1 to 10. Doesn't scales an arbitrary. 1 to 10. 10 being really clear, 1 being hardly at all. And right now, the first time you do it, you go, I might be a 5. That's fine. From that, have another go. Try and sharpen it up. Maybe move yourself to a 6. From doing simple objects that when you can see, apple doesn't make any difference. You could be looking at a chair, image the chair. If you've got the image of the chair in front of you, use that. But be better at your imagery, and then put yourself in those situations which you haven't done before. Practice imagery. It really helps you deliver performance in context where it's very difficult. A second skill, self-talk. Our inner voice, gosh, our inner voice can be negative. Our inner voice can be utterly destructive, self-destructive. Our inner voice can be so horribly self-critical. That you? Most of us it is. Is that you? When you get tired and you feel that your performance is drifting, do you get critical? Well, that's common. So what we try to do is capture those thoughts, capture them, and then place something to reappraise them, to think about them differently. I'm really tired because that says I'm working really hard. I'm really tired, and what I've got to try and do now is think about smooth, efficient, relaxed performance. So you get mantras that help you talk through good technique, help you talk through getting through each moment. Help when you get tired, you get self-talk, which helps you flip to a process goal. Be in the moment, make the moment as smooth as possible. When you get really tired and you suddenly think you've got 8 hours left of this really tough exercise, overwhelming, break that down, drop it down to what am I doing right now? How can I make that smoother, more efficient, easier, so I can cope right now. I can cope right now. Self-talk, get the key critical situations in your mind so you know what they are, where your self-talk is really debilitating. Write them down. Then beside those, write down what you'd like to say. And that might be quite difficult. Or write down what, if there's a coach, if there's someone inspirational, if you needed changing, what that person would say to you. And you write, and those become the self-talk statements. You need to revise yourself, keep them short, keep them simple. Revise them, look at them, keep them in a place where you can see them, so that you are prompted that when something happens, it's really quite negative, you have those thoughts in your mind to try and bring you back to a good place. Self-talk, imagery, skills that can be practiced, simply done. You most likely do a version of them already. More of them, practice regularly, before training, before endurance events, in times of practice, in times away from practice. The more you do, generally those skills will improve, and then you'll use them in context and your performance will improve and you'll feel happier. One of the key areas that I often get asked about in ultra endurance is your feelings, your mood, and what they like. And people want to be positive. One of the things about ultra endurance is that you are going at an intensity as ultra endurance for some period of time, which usually means that you don't get enough sleep in the performance. It usually means that nutrition is critical because you're using energy at a really fast rate. You're often moving, and so therefore meals become quite difficult to have. The type of food you typically eat changes in accordance with the performance environment. So I've been with runners who have eaten gels for hours and hours and hours, and I can tell you that repeated gels are not good for your digestive system, and other things happen. Getting used to them, understanding how your body responds to this type of intake is really good. Understanding and being confident that the amount of sleep you're going to get, which probably will be less than you need, but you still be able to perform as well as you need to, is really good. But being confident about it, accepting that's an inevitable part of the challenge is key, and being confident that you can overcome those is really important. Because if you are anxious that your diet is not going to be good, if you're anxious that you're not getting enough sleep, the anxiety contributes to the ongoing mood of feeling tired because you're tired, and therefore it makes it much worse, and the negative effects which from that increase, and it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy then. So we're trying to create this going in the other direction, a strong resilient set of beliefs that you can cope with lack of sleep, and strong resilient beliefs that you can cope with a varied diet. First up and you've got to then, so what you've got to do is then become exploring within yourself how you cope when you haven't got much sleep. What's the narrative that goes through your mind? How do your feelings change when you're a bit grumpy? You monitor your mood. What mood am I in? How do I feel? Do I feel anxious? There are loads of scales we can use there. Panicky, vigorous, lively. We can then rate those. Not at all, very much so. And you can develop your own personal scales. How do I feel? Write down those words. How intense do I feel? Am I very bad mood to a very good mood, whatever the description is? Your own personal scale is really fine. You don't have to overcomplicate the measurement of this, because it's personal to you. And what you want to be able to do is compare that against times when you're in a much better mood, so you can know, actually, then I was in a really bad mood. Now, if that mood was affecting my thinking, was affecting what I was doing, and therefore, how do I change that mood? One of the ways in ultra endurance to change mood is through your nutrition, to get your nutrition right. If you want somebody to be grumpy, starve them. Very simple. If you want somebody to be grumpy, get them, make them tired. So you can use sleep and food as periodic rest points, regeneration points, and so that your mood improves as accordingly. So you can monitoring your mood and learning when that it's more functional to get a 10 minutes nap to improve your mood, or when to eat is therefore a useful strategy. And then building in how those nutritional strategies can keep you going through the day. What food can you eat? What food can you keep down? What food doesn't wreck your digestive system so you end up on the toilet all day, which is an absolute fact, which many endurance athletes, ultra endurance athletes experience in their trial and error around getting the nutrients right. So be really conscious of your mood, monitor it, develop your own personal awareness of how your feelings then affect your thoughts, behaviours. And this is where your strategies to use self-talk and imagery come kicking in as ways to try and repair those moods. Because if you image yourself performing really well, if you use self-talk to help you cope with really difficult situations, what that will do is build resilient beliefs of confidence that you can cope with such challenges. And guess what? When it comes to them, you're better prepared than you were previously. Okay, so how does this start to work in practice? And this is going to work from the mighty Greg White, Professor Greg White, a long 30-year friend of mine, an inspirational sports scientist who's helped many athletes do in so impressive challenges. David Walliams swim across the channel and so on. The model starts with belief. Can I do this? And it's like almost a vague intention to some degree, that you're not confident, but you've got a belief that you can do it, you've got a hope that you can do it. So that you've got to start with a belief, but it's not at this point grounded in experience. It's not a resilient set of beliefs, but you want to do it. You've got a belief that you can do it, but it's a want to do it. That then follows with a commitment. This commitment starts with, this is the session I'm going to do. This is the session. This session builds the skills I need in order to give me the attributes, the qualities that are going to be required in the performance. You commit to the session, you do the session, results come in, you start achieving. From the achievement, what does this build? Success builds motivation. Success strengthens belief that you start going, it's the hope that you can achieve something starts becoming a resilient set of beliefs that you could do something. Across this process, let's build psychological skills into this. The beliefs to start with, you start thinking, what will that be like? You haven't got the clear idea of all the difficulties that are going on at this point. You haven't done them. You haven't started to swim in the really cold water. You haven't been out in the exposed environment. You haven't been performing when you're really tired. But you've got hope that you can get through them. You've got a belief that you can get through them. So you then start making commitments to train like that. So you go, I'm going to do a 5-hour session. I'm going to see how I cope. My mind copes after 5 hours. So you do some imagery of which you remember previous times where you've done long duration performances, and you start to wax and wane when it gets tired, and so you go, well, when my thoughts start going, I've had enough of this, I'm just going to go slow, and whatever those thoughts are, they'll be personal to you. You repair them, saying, well, when those thoughts come in, I'm going to cycling. I'm going to relax, constantly relax my arms, going to find a gear, and I'm going to keep my rhythm. If we are doing a physical task where we need to hold strength, we then split it down into short periods of time. I'll be strong for 10 seconds and then relax a bit. So you make it into manageable chunks. You get key cue words which strengthen good technique so that you're efficient in all those times. Ultra endurance has to be about efficient movement, efficient performance, because you So an important part of developing your psychological skills is to record progress in a training diary. Now we usually have training diaries for our physical skills, which we record what we've done and we can see the progress and it's all good. Psychological skills should be no different. We said they improve via practice. You've got to use self-reported measures. How good am I at imagery? How good am I at self-talk? And you write that down. And you get arbitrary measures via reflection of how well did it went. You then start thinking critically, and honestly is really important here. Am I doing this better? Is it making any difference? In the early stages, it doesn't always make that much of a difference, but over time, what normally happens is people get good at using self-talk, imagery, setting goals, which are outcome process learning. They learn to use them at the right appropriate moment, are positive in really difficult situations, are really good at managing intense unwanted emotions, really good at being able to push through when it's really fatigued, being able to have a mindset that stops them really being self-destructive when you've still got quite a long way to go and you really need to be in the moment, taking every second, every moment, one by one, because that's about all you've got the energy for, and you just keep going on that, and that is possible to do that. That's what ultra endurance athletes do. You've got to monitor it, you've got to record it, you've got to be able to know there's progress. You've got to be able to know there's progress. So you record it, monitor it, you reflect. Reflection's fairly key. How well did that training session go? How good was my mental preparation? When I performed really well, what 3 things did I do that was really good, that underpins that performance that I should do next time I want to perform really well? That's 3 things. So you get good at pulling out what you did well and learning how to repeat that, and you get good at understanding what you can work on. So your learning goals come into it. But you've got to keep monitoring it. So key messages: psychological skills can be developed over time with practice. Goals should be set for each session, and so that you are clear on what you're working towards. Goals don't always have to be outcomes, they can be process and learning. Psychological skills, imagery, self-talk, we just picked 2, there are more, but we picked 2. Build them in. See yourself being successful. Understand how